Okay, so this is Dr. Zeus again coming back at you with heck, why don't I start with my full screen here and coming back to you with our week 10 Ask Dr. Zeus response to your exercises, to your contributions. We'll go basically over the anger and contempt aspects, how to deal with anger. Anger is an enormously popular emotion in this class. Two groups are working on it. I think it's because anger is a coverall. Anger is the basic way in which we proactively cover our emotions versus shame or guilt, in which we're kind of obscuring them, or other forms of lying or obscuring. Anger kind of allows us to have control of the situation. The notion of like, I'll reject you before you can reject me, that kind of thing in a relationship in which the two people are on unstable vulnerability and emotional grounds with them. So anger can also be used for things like being angry at social injustice or being angry at racism or sexism. So anger has many uses. Again, um, we have to take a long view on things. Anger can be initially a negating emotion, but if it allows you to be righteously angry about some injustice that's been done in the world that makes you more compassionate or more empathetic, and more willing to act on behalf of someone who is being oppressed, then actually can be quite constructive. Again, it is not a mistake to ever see these emotions in terms of something simply as good or bad, positive, negative, antisocial, or pro-social. As I've explained in the previous video, antisocial can become pro-social, and sometimes even pro-social can deteriorate. As someone who is happy or takes glee in the suffering of another person, even if that person is someone who deserves their comeuppance. Which is not a healthy way to go at it. It's a regressive situation. So emotions are not terribly complex per se. They can be, but they're long term and they have many moving parts. So we're going to go ahead and start on that, start looking into it. And here we go. Okay, so let's go. Put myself back down in the corner again. Again, applying insights from lecture to generate your own insights is a lot of what I want to have you do in these exercises. Here's another example from one of your classmates. The chemistry of emotion that relates my family and I, where when anger gains momentum, quote, this creates a new injustice, a perceived imbalance, a disproportional response, which invites stronger anger and a sense of injustice by the other party. A negative feedback loop is established. That was taken from the paper that I'd given you. For example, this person says, my father can be angry at me because I'm getting screamed at. I get angry too. I try to hurt him with my words so I can get a reaction out of him. Most of the times I succeed, but it's not a hurt reaction that I get. I get an even angrier reaction, and he tries to hurt me with his words as well. So you get this idea of the negative feedback loop here. We go back and forth until one of us gives up. It seems like there's always has to be a winner. Anger is creating a type of motivation to keep one-upping each other. The connection between anger and motivation is the urge to be on top of everything. So again, this motivation, if it's a competitive motivation, can end up with this negative loop, okay? Here's another example of anger and motivation. A personal example I can think of is moving out of my parents' house and going to college. Life at home was not the best, and father was not very helpful. In fact, he made it a point to make things difficult for me. When I came to college, he did not help in any way and made it so I did not even have a ride to college. I was obviously angry and even sad at the fact that he would go that far, that it only motivated me to find a way. I saved money, found a job near campus, found a ride, and left to college. So again, anger can motivate. What seems like an antisocial emotion at the outset, anger, was applied in a pro-social direction to motivate strengthening or healthy responses to an. And instead of a negative feedback loop in which people are screaming at each other, it created a positive feedback loop when a person said, listen, I'm not going to let you determine my future. I'm going to go ahead and find a way to create conditions in my life that allow me to have empowerment. So again, this is where the motivation and emotions are not straightforward. Nothing has a prescription attached to it. A pro-social emotion can become antisocial. Antisocial emotion become pro-social. Our whole idea is to understand these movements and how we can use these examples that you've provided and some of the background lectures I'm providing and some of the supportive readings that are being provided to us by research, by Ekman and others, to develop a really fully fleshed out understanding of potentiality and craft knowledge to actually apply what we know in our actual day-to-day life and relationships. So again, that's what this class is about, really focusing on that. I just thought this was kind of funny. It said, for example, I do not have a relationship with Donald Trump, so that lessens my motivation to control my anger. She's going to an Ekman article that says, listen, when we have a relationship with someone, that motivates us more to control our anger. And in that example, the reason I control my anger is because of the legal consequences. I just thought that was funny. I thought I'd throw that in there. Again, people could say the same thing about Hillary Clinton and so forth, so I'm not taking political sides here, but just sharing that. From the way I understand it, the connection between emotion and motivation starts by how we process a situation, followed by the action our brains tell us to make, based both on past experience and physical threat, increasing or decreasing motivational states. That's true. At least that's part of it. Again, by interceding with our present state through a conscious engagement and learning into that emotion, we can create a different pathway going forward. Here's an important insight about the difference between being a student and a professional with a teacher, that is you with me, and being a client of a therapist. I've noticed very high quality input in this class. All these examples are great examples of high quality input. This got me to wondering if it might be more helpful to deal with emotions as a student rather than a client. When you engage someone to develop improved capacities in yourself, that's me challenging you to prove things, okay, for yourself and in yourself. You are an agent and I'm the facilitator or teacher. That's much different when you pay someone to resolve a situation, which is typical in a client-therapist relationship. You have much greater motivation and a much more open framework to come at problems as a complex applied system in the teacher and agent or teacher-student relationship, rather than a separated small picture problem as a therapist trying to help you solve a particular issue or communication problem. See, this is a wider approach, and it really puts a lot of the onus on you to be curious, to look into things, rather than have some outside expert helping you to solve a particular smaller problem that probably has its roots in a larger complex picture. So I've noticed that the former motivates you to experiment, that's when the teacher-student relationship, and engage in a far deeper fashion because the point is positive learning rather than the negative cessation of a supposed dysfunction or problem. Oftentimes you go to an actual therapist to solve a dysfunction or problem. What I'm showing you is that a dysfunction or problem is not something to be solved. It's a doorway to understand the emotional world that you live in and the relationships and so forth that you have between you and someone else, and to use that then doorway as a way into positive or pro-social replacement or evolution or transformation of that emotion. So I'm just noticing a difference there. Here's a great question. This one had to do with that example I already talked about before. Father is having difficulty letting go of her daughter, and she wants to be able to have respect and at the same time honor the nature of their friendship and relationship. A question I would have, this person says, is how would one bring up this concept of empathizing instead of self-justifying to someone else while not offending them? A great one, okay? And here's my response. It's not an absolutely clear answer, but I hope it helps you understand the issue better. Not leaving loved ones behind or abandoning them, which is everyone's greatest fear at root, which is the fear of abandonment, and letting them know they still occupy a central and essential place in your life, but you're inviting them to participate in a higher and wider capacity. So here's the trick. How do you get them to empathize instead of self-justify? Like, your daddy's little girl and he wants to keep you that way. And you're like, well, we can do some things together, but I'm going to be doing these other things. He's going to think that that's a step down in his status, a step down in his relationship, a step down in the time he's going to spend with you. But here's the trick. By saying, listen, our changing relationship is actually going to be a step up for you, and here's how. Okay? Instead of just being a buddy and daddy's little girl down here, a possible future as a grandfather and a colleague and making life choices for me and my family. Okay, of course, got to keep it from being overarching and then like that person determining your choices. So there, it has to be done very well. But basically, in helping to make life choices and sharing wisdom, there can be buddy time for sake of nostalgia, but new activities and discussions about life choices that reinforce equality over paternalism. So you're helping that person into a new relationship, which is more equal versus paternal one, but showing that person, at least in your mind, and through some of your actions, that's a promotion. It's not a demotion. You can still spend buddy time together, but now I'm going to need you to be a grandfather, possible grandfather, and need to avail your wisdom, and advice, not necessarily going to take it point blank, but to help inform my own life decisions and to create a welcoming place for my spouse, if that happens to be it. Again, that's a great question. And here's the basic principle for any emotional situation in which change is happening in a relationship. You're moving out, you're no longer daddy's little girl, or you're no longer the child living in your parents' basement. You involve them in a way that it makes it seem as if there's a promotion in their status in your relationship by creating a sense of respect and honoring their wisdom. And in that sense, also ask for them to honor yours. So you're not just lifting them up above you, but you're also lifting yourself up too. People just, it's just basic psychology. People don't like to sell a house when it's lost money because they're like, oh, I lost money, And so if you show that actually there was a gain in your relationship, but you determine that or play that out in an equal way, a lot of times a person will be much more open, not just to being empathetic instead of self-justifying, but to feel like they've gained something when some change comes that they might feel is threatening or too sudden for them. So that's just a little trick to use out there somewhere. Here's a great example where empathy is being used over judgment in a way that really, really can I think, be instructive for everybody. I'll just go ahead and read it straight out. I'll begin by saying I'm a coach for cheerleading, and this will be about something that happened with my girls. I wanted to notice that one of the most talented girls that I have on the team began to look very sad with her head down and had an I don't care attitude, so that's where I thought of this project. The area of persistent conflict was where she was not doing the job she was supposed to be doing, even though I tried motivating her. So again, she tried external motivation, not working. Okay, we're getting a theme here. Internal motivation works, intrinsic motivation works much better than extrinsic motivation. Extrinsic motivation usually has a threat applied to it. Intrinsic motivation has some kind of joy applied to it. That's why it's more successful. So normally I would just say it's okay. She probably went through something and let it pass. The next day though, it was the same thing. So there's this persistence of emotion, which indicates this may be a deeper problem. So this time I decided to call her out and talk to her privately, away from the other girls, and ask her if she was okay. I said she was doing very bad in her grades and her performance. So I wanted to know what was going on because it was not like her. She began to say that she was staying with a friend of hers because her parents kicked her out of her house. Yikes. I did my best to feel what she was feeling because I have never been through that before. So empathizing, I began to feel very sad, and normally I'm not this way where I ask what's going on, but she began opening up to me and she began to cry, and she said she was truly sorry, but she felt stressed, and I gave her a hug. See what happens when you take the time to be emotionally aware here and have the courage to follow through? I started to tell her that she need not to worry, that I was there for her, and I gave her money so that she wouldn't feel so stressed. She cried even more when I did this. It was very emotional, and I've never experienced that before. I had a lot of empathy toward her, and she was able to feel it because I could physically see it. I felt good about myself, but I ended up telling her that I was sorry for pushing her to do the work instead of asking her what was going on. She said she was sorry for not letting me know sooner, but I understood that she didn't tell me before because I was never one to feel empathy. See what happens when you actually take the initiative to create the arena of empathy, and you allow a person to open up about them, and you have this mutual appreciation for the gift that each of you were given. Now, in this case, the gift is partly physical in terms of money, but allowing her to get it off her chest, but also allowing to know she has someone she can confide in, the younger girl. But there's also a gift being done for the cheerleading coach here, and that is the gift of empathy, being able to be someone who develops and strengthens themselves emotionally. Here's another great example from that same person. This goes back to a later thing on a pet peeve. But again, pet peeves are kind of a form of anger, so this is appropriate. I have a pet peeve when I'm coaching out, and it really frustrates me. There are times when my girls are stunting and they begin to talk and the top girl falls. There's nothing scarier to me than watching my girls fall because I'm afraid they will get injured. So every time that they're stunting and they drop a girl, I make them do some kind of exercise like push-ups. Every single time that this happens, obviously extrinsic motivation there. Every single time that this happens, they have such negative emotions. There have been times when they have yelled at me saying I was not being fair. I get very frustrated and annoyed when they drop a stunt because I remember what it felt like to be dropped. So whenever this happens, so again, past emotional patterns entering into the situation. So whenever this happens, I show it in my face and I'm angry and they already know. I don't even have to say anything. They automatically get on the floor after dropping a stunt and do push-ups. I would do it as a punishment. So this time I tried something different. What I did was I let the stunt fall, and it was kind of funny because they were ready to go running and their facial expressions all changed till I remembered that I needed to keep calm and not get mad. So I walked up to them and asked them what happened. So using it as a learning opportunity rather than a reflexive, non-conscious, you have to punishment, behavioral conditioning. Now doing it as a reflective learning engagement exercise, okay? They were very surprised, their faces changed, and they even said thank you. The thing is that I was left in awe because right after that, they did not drop any stunts at all for the rest of the day. Not surprising. It was like they learned on their own, and because they weren't upset, they did an even better job. This showed me that because of my mood change and my concern for them, they wanted to do better. I was only making them worse when they would get punished because they were upset. Again, upset, threat, punishment closes down the learning centers, makes it you're less able to engage and be attentive, and makes it more likely that you actually will do something dangerous if you're doing something like a stunt. So interesting. You think it's going to work, but it ends up not working. And actually, the thing you don't think is going to work, you think, oh, they'll take advantage of me if we just talk it out, ends up working the better. So this helped me to make them better, and it taught me a little self-control. So again, both people are getting something out of this. The way that I talk about it is funnel that punishment feeling into something affirmative and alternative. In other words, try something different and try something affirmative, and it will work better. Let me see here. Here is an interesting thing because I think it demonstrates sociocultural variables. I think my greatest personal fear in life is ending up alone with no partner in life and no legacy to leave behind in the world. I feel like in today's world, the way love is looked at, the way people look at relationships is completely different than how I view them. This person goes on to explain that she had parents that didn't get divorced, and again, probably holds some more traditional views on that. And here's the punchline. I think that because I feel like people don't look at marriage and love the same way that I tend to, that I'll never find my match, and I'll never find someone who takes it as seriously as I do. And then she deals with this fear by talking it out with friends and also with parents, and they try to reassure her. What I like about this example is, again, sociocultural variables, traditional values, parents still married, etc., can influence your emotional patterns and the way you see things, and can create fears in you as well, and a sense of being disjointed. What I would do with this and say, listen, instead of looking at all the other people doing things differently, begin to look at your own patterns, and be much more flexible or open about where other people are coming from. But if that's something you feel important about, then it may be more difficult, but you may have to be more patient. But to begin to look to that and go into arenas about other people who express the same kinds of values around, for instance, marriage. Another thing this brings up is fears have a real basis. There is a crumbling economy. Even college graduates are doing menial jobs. And so, all fears aren't necessarily transformed. Obviously, you can't let anxiety overcome you, but you can allow yourself to be realistic about the situation in front of you. Sometimes it's not just a fear, it's an actual description of what's actually happening around people. So that's important. A great point that I wanted to offer you came from one of the people's responses to this notion of Edward Bernays in the 1920s using cigarettes, calling them torches of freedom, and selling them to women as symbols of being able to grasp this, I guess you would say, the phallic symbol of male power, but also express their own freedom. The point that this person made was that women, Virginia Slims, she was comparing this to Virginia Slims in the modern day context. Virginia Slims does this by telling women to purchase their items instead of learning to love themselves or truly reflecting and figuring out what needs to be done to fix their insecurities. Again, so much of what drives consumerism and manipulation of emotions is this notion that we can sell you something that will give you a shortcut to doing the emotional, courageous work on yourself, or that will give you the power or hand the power over to, rather than externally, extrinsically, rather than intrinsically developing that power yourself. Always be suspicious of someone who says that they have the answer, whether it's a church or whether it's an advertisement, and especially if it means giving up your responsibilities to somebody, okay? Any, I think, legitimate religion or legitimate institution or legitimate consumer choice even is going to actually help you with that external thing, empower you to develop internal strength or knowledge or ability, rather than take the place of that. That's the difference between steroids and vitamins. Vitamins actually help your body become stronger for itself. Steroids replace the body's ability to be strong by adding an artificial stimulant or to muscle growth, for instance, that takes the place of your own development. That's a good way to kind of discern between something that's healthy or not healthy in terms of emotional growth. Again, it has to do with a self-determination theory, again, being free to choose, which is autonomy, being capable of worthy, which is competence, and being close with others, relatedness. Plus this notion of Maslow of belonging. How these basic needs for the self are hijacked by those trying to manipulate needs to sell products or ideas to you. Remember that. It's ironic that someone would use the very things that would allow you to develop yourself internally and try to get you to give that up in order to sell you something externally. This is, again, the reason why I'm bringing this out, because emotion, it's everywhere. Media is a manipulation of your emotions, trying to manipulate you to be angry or scared. That's the news. And then what comes on right after that? The drugs. Okay. The drugs telling you all these problems that you're experiencing on this news program can be solved for you by just taking this or being prescribed this. Yeah, Edward Bernays gave the emotional connection with the goods. Again, people's desire must overshadow their needs. Again, that was what he was saying in there. This doesn't just work on women, it works on men. Like this video game, this PlayStation 4 console. Again, it's a first-person game, which gives you the power, or you got the gun, or whatever it happens to be. And an advertisement, this person is pointing out, is single man adorned in a king's crown, flashing to scenes of a throne with a man partying in the camera's wake. The advertisement looked to place the viewer in this heroic king storming into battle with each passing change of scenery, taking each new battlefield with ease. Okay, so again, it's not just women are being appealed to, but it's also men. Okay, and in this case, there are gendered appeals for power and autonomy. And the way that I put it, they're trying to appeal to the man to be the king on the throne rather than the provider of the feast. I'm writing a book now where I'm really making that distinction clear, that the provider of this feast is a healthy way for man to engage emotionally and spiritually. And this king on the throne is the unhealthy way of doing it. And I put it this way, these advertisers understood that as humans, we have a desire to express who we think our inner self is in the outer people of the world, influenced often by celebrity trends, movements, and societies and social norms. Again, what is more powerful? It's that inner thing. But the inner thing we have insecurity about unless it can be expressed in the outer world and be taken up in some way. And by advertisements will oftentimes manipulate that so that they say, well, we have the surefire method or product for you to do that successfully. Usually it takes a little bit more than that. So here's a great question posed by one of you, and it's an interesting one and a different point of view. So I think I'm going to put there, is contempt ever justified? I kind of implied that it wasn't, okay? But again, like righteous anger at injustice, maybe there are some instances. This person tends to supply one of those instances, okay? An example where I expressed disgust with an individual or contempt actually made me feel pleasant and justified. We've got to look at it in context. We members at a private club have been dealing with the incompetence of an employee that is no less than her being a bully. This individual has somehow misinterpreted what a service industry is supposed to be. I witnessed this person insult a little old lady who only wanted change for the washing machine. I'd say change my relationship into one of fear for the other person. She completely avoids me now, which quite frankly is nice. In other words, he confronted her, and now this person fears her rather than is contemptuous, which he thought was a good way to do it. So his contempt of her. So a positive reaction to an individual I had was gratitude toward a professor in San Jose University. This individual took time out of his busy schedule to explain a principle I was having difficulty with. I actually bought him a bottle of Merlot, etc. So this is sort of the opposite. This is a positive judgment, a positive feeling of what happened as a result. As Ekman suggests, contempt is often accompanied by anger. After reading this week's readings, I'd have to agree with most of his findings. Every time I see this employee and the multiple times she has bullied elderly individuals in the park, I feel anger. No wish to change or improve my relationship. We members have instigated a process to have her removed from employment. So again, this person suggests that sometimes a person just needs to learn the brute way, which is to say this is unacceptable behavior and you are no longer welcome to work here because you're not right for this job. Most of the time I try to work with people, but it's true that some people simply aren't fit. And this can be true of a romantic relationship as well. You find, wait a minute, our emotional profiles are so far apart, we just can't find common ground. And in that case, it makes sense to either terminate employment in this case, or in another case, to just simply say this relationship is ending. So that's always on the table. It's fun. Again, if you're in a mutually vulnerable relationship where it's insecurities that are getting in the way, I don't think that that's what will happen, or that's what should result. Unless one's insecurity is just sabotaging the relationship itself. Usually if you can find some growth or progress in the relationship and the person's willing to listen and try, usually there's always a room to go forward. In this case, that was the one just mentioned, it didn't look like that was really an option. Another example of cross wires that can be solved by empathy. This person is very busy, keeps declining to go out with her brother because she's busy. The other brother thinks that she doesn't care and is blowing him off. But they have time to talk it out. And this person said she was willing to listen to her brother without interrupting and genuinely cared about what his frustration was. His facial expression was a mix of confusion and joy. He proceeded to explain why he felt it was important that we spend time together and how he felt like I did not like to be around him because I kept saying no. Our other two siblings live far away, so he felt as though we need to stick together and become closer. And so they came up with, again, a compromise plan where, he's not spending all the time because she actually is busy, but they come up with a plan to have a sibling day or hour, rather every 2 weeks, where they can spend quality time together. Again, an intentional time, even if it's a small amount of time, it's still quality time. So here's the whole thing, okay? Again, we visit this issue of instrumental versus intrinsic. I have to do this in order to get that. That's the intrinsic. That's the external to external. If I don't shout and be heard by this person, I'm not going to get my way. That's the external and extrinsic and instrumental way of doing things. Another way would be say, I have to be perfect to be a professional, right? It's evaluative versus developmental. One says, I have to be this in order to be that. In order to be successful, I have to be this. Where developmental says, I have to work toward this. I have to make some small steps. I have to open up in order to be able to be better at what I do. What you're doing when you take a more developmental, intrinsic approach, you're avoiding the appearance, instead of avoiding the appearance of mistakes, you simply allow yourself to make genuine mistakes, right? And learn from them. What really is the value of external perfection anyway? It really does not seem to have much value. If perfection is overvalued because it labels us as pure and good on the outside without really producing on the inside, right? because we're not really vulnerable and open to change and ability to learn and grow, then it ends up actually being counterproductive. It may give you a short-term gain, it may make people may make you look good to other people, but it erodes your actual internal capacity to have fulfilling relationships and to learn into something. So again, it's a short-term gain, just like any high is, like getting drunk or whatever, long-term problem. We want to be able to take small steps, small short-term gains, not huge, and look at it in a longer-term fashion. And here's another way I put it. Let your external work be an intrinsic extension of who you are internally. An authentic interaction with the world, not some task to get a degree so that you can have more opportunity, even though it is hopefully going to open up opportunity if you get a degree in this course. Use the present assignment, that is the assignments in this course, as an opportunity to be, learn, and express yourself more fully. This will lead you to your unique genius that will set you apart in what you have to offer in the professional realm. If you're just a generic person that comes into a situation, hasn't learned how to open up, become vulnerable, become capable emotionally, and learn what they uniquely can give to a situation, you're going to just be another applicant. This has realistic and practical actually benefits, and it's not just about being a good citizen. It's also about being a unique, capable professional. So being real actually promotes being successful. We don't simply need another generic formulaic professional. Look at this class. I'm not using a formula, but working with your wisdom and experience to build knowledge, awareness, and capability. So that's what we have to understand here. And that's what we're working toward together. Me just trying to facilitate that process. Well, I hope that's given you a decent survey over these different topics. And again, thanks for being so open and so effective in supplying your own examples. I've learned a lot myself, and I feel like we are a learning community around this. I'm glad. I feel like I've been vindicated in taking a much more affirmative and engagement-oriented approach to emotions instead of a hands-off, simply just studious approach. And you seem to have taken up the gauntlet and gone out and done these experiments to full effect. So again, my gratitude toward you as we head into these last few weeks. Again, we're only going to have about one more academic-oriented class, and the rest is really going to be working on this projects and presentations. So you can bring your questions forward in this forum as well as provide your answers to some of the questions and experiments I have. So until next time, this is Zeus signing off. Thanks. Bye.